How did you make your way to the Space Theatre? Where did it start?
Well, I should probably start just before the space itself actually started by saying that I originally met Yvonne Bryceland. The third production I was ever in was Yvonne's production, one of the few times she produced, of The Red-Headed Blonde at the Labia. And I eventually had a walk-on part as a first aid attendant together with Fitzmorley. We became good friends, particularly when I discovered that she lived immediately over my head in Queen's Road and Sea Point in a flat with her husband Danny. To a certain extent, I think I took her under my wings in those days. She was still working at the Cape Times. I helped Yvonne and David Bloomberg to get a divorce from Danny, and then she got herself a flat in Bantry Bay and met a Stellenbosch student by the name of Brian Asprey. And the two of them would float around Cape Town with Yvonne on the back of Brian's scooter. I did some more work with her at that stage also. And then the two of them went over to England and came back full of excitement. They were going to open the Space Theatre. They got the name from England, I assumed, and they were going to get started. By which stage, Brian and Yvonne were living in Queen's Road and Sea Point, but at the bottom of the road below my mother's house where I was living. And I virtually lived there a lot of the time. We talked about the possibilities of a theatre, and I met Athol Fugard for the first time there. And then they tried to raise money for this new theatre with great difficulty. They sort of got 1,000 rand, eventually got 2,000 rand. And then Brian took me around a few places looking at premises for a theatre. We looked at E.K. Green's warehouse in Somerset Road in Greenpoint, which I thought was a marvellous setting. Brian didn't like it. Then out of the blue, he took me to a horrible place in Bloom Street, owned by Raymond Sebber. It used to be their plating works for Sebbers. And he said, "What do you think of this?" I said, "I think it's terrible." He says, "Tough," he says, "I've taken it." It was very typical of Brian. I said, "Right, when are we going to start on the thing?" Brian said, "Well, I haven't got enough money, I'll have to wait." So I waited, and I kept on pestering Brian, when are we going to start? And it was arranged that I was going to rewire the place and set it up as a theatre. Then eventually they got close to the 3,000 rand. I said to Brian, can't wait anymore. He wasn't paying Raymond rent until the theatre started, in actual fact. But Raymond was a marvellous landlord. He put up with an awful lot of expletives. Eventually I said to Brian, let's get started. You've got 3,000. It's not going to cost earth to at least get started. Let's go for it. So Brian said, all right, you start. I bought wire, I had very little else. I had all the tools and what have you. And I went up on a Saturday morning early, a ladder and my tools, and I started unbolting the covers on the buzz bars. There were 2 rows of buzz bars right down the main area that was going to be the theatre. And I started taking these covers off and putting them on the ground. Somewhere around 10, I would think, there was a noise up the stairs, and Yvonne, Brian, Mrs. A, that's Mrs. Asprey, and Athol, probably somebody else, I can't remember now, we talked about a long time ago, turned up. I looked at the mess I'd made on the floor, and Yvonne shouted out, "Look, everybody, we're getting a theatre." And everybody got terribly excited. And then they said, "Let's get paint and start painting." I bit my tongue. With the little knowledge of theatre I had, I knew that the last thing you do a couple of days before production opens is paint. But I thought, they need the excitement, they need to maintain the enthusiasm, and off they charged and got paint and started sloshing paint on. Needless to say, there was the wrong colour, the wrong people painting. It didn't matter. The enthusiasm was there. We went on and on with rewiring and building a lighting box was my side of it. And I was supposed to help with the stage platforms for the, what is the word, Percy? Stage platforms.
The rostrum.
Roster. Sorry. I was running out of time because I was getting married. And I got Jeff Shapiro to come down from Johannesburg to be my best man at my wedding. And he was at a loose end waiting for the wedding. And I got him to build the rostra. The night before I got married, I was about 2 or 3 days before the opening of the first performance. Jeff and I were working. I told my intended I was having a bachelor party. A bachelor party consisted of Jeff and myself. Jeff was finishing off the roster, and I was busy putting the covers back onto the buzz bars. All the wiring had been changed, and we had plugs all along them now. I was all ready for the theatre to go. And I was up on a ladder. I think you know the story, Percy. And my drill went into a live conduit, a live supply. The bit suddenly became red hot, and I was flung off the ladder flat on my back. Luckily, the drill was double insulated. I got to my feet again, and I said to Jeff, right, for the rest of this evening, you've still got a couple of days to go. I said, I haven't. I'm out tonight. So I tied my handkerchief to my belt. I said, Jeff, you hang on to the handkerchief. Anything goes wrong, yank like hell. Which he did. He hung on. He didn't have to like the hell. And we finished off the rostra, the buzz bars. I remember, in actual fact, where the show opened, I wasn't there. I was on honeymoon, and I listened to the report of the opening on the radio whilst I was on the honeymoon, and it was a great opening, apparently. That was where the space started. That's my story, at any rate, for what it's worth. After that, I took more of a back seat in the space. I did some more work on the other theatre, the studio theatre, where Peter Dirk Ace started. I think he did the first production there. I went to every single production of the space, thoroughly enjoyed it. And then came the time when they wanted to move further down Long Street to the YWCA. They got me involved in that one as well. My partner and I, Yeni, and I designed and built the lighting box sticking out into the main auditorium. We built the grid overhead to hold the lights. We designed the whole lighting structure and the boards and installed them. I oversaw the contract for the lighting of the rest of the building and for the air conditioning of the building. I was actually at that stage still involved in selling industrial fans, so I had an involvement in that. I remember we printed up a very large scale lighting information sheet on the lighting for the lighting box. That was one of the things that stuck in my mind. We had our own printing operation going at the same time. Then eventually, when the space moved over, I was there in the now memorable photo that Brian took the entire the cast and audience of the last night of the old space, walked down Long Street, with the chairs from the place there, sat them down in the middle of Long Street itself, late at night. Brian climbed on the roof and took photos of the entire audience sitting on the chairs outside the new space. It was a rather memorable occasion. If you see the photo, which is in Brian's book, I think, right in the back row, I think you'll see Werner and his wife and myself and my wife at the time. And then the space took off. Moira Fine had actually been involved in the space from way back before that. She became more involved even with the new space venue. She did marvelous work right until the time she passed away, I think. Eventually, my business interests put more pressure on me as well, and I had to take more of a back seat. Eventually, literally got out, particularly when it changed to the people space. I found I was not that interested anymore. Something had gone out of the original camaraderie and the enthusiasm that we had at both the venues of the space. I have one little memento of the new space. I must tell you for fun. When we started work at the new space, under the existing stage, which we've moved around, I found a number of cheap trophies, silver-plated trophies, which were used by the YWCA for competitions and things. I collared those. They had no particular value as builders' findings. Carefully took the ears off the trophies, and as my financial status at that stage was fairly bad, I used them for a good number of years as kiddish cups until I could afford silver ones. And I thought it was rather fun or interesting that I was using cups used by the YWCA as Jewish kiddish cups. Today, that's all gone. There it is.
Now, Les, you did all this for nothing. I mean,
Yeah, for nothing. It cost me an arm and a leg, as most of these things do eventually do. Took a lot of time up and some business time at that, plus materials and odd things, yes.
But Les, you know, you put in so much work. Why? What was the passion that drove you? What made you want to do it?
I would say multifold. One is that by the time the space had come on the horizon, I was already heavily involved in the theatre. And as you know, I did an awful lot of productions. I was doing up to 13 productions a year at the Little Theatre alone. I enjoyed it, the theatre. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed discovering how to use materials, different type of materials. I even use some of the marvelous discoveries we made in those days. To this day, in my own work now, I even use it. People like Cecil Pym taught me an awful lot, which I'm very grateful for. And I did a lot of teaching of the students, the university students in those days, which I enjoyed as well. When the space came on the scene, I thought this is something better even than the Little Theatre operation. This is more for the people of Cape Town, more for promoting the anti-apartheid story, an opportunity to meet people in different walks of life and to work with them. And to me, it was pure enjoyment. I got a terrific amount out of a sense of achievement. It was one of the benefits I think I got from it. And it was certainly something different from a humdrum existence. Not sure if I had a humdrum existence, but whatever. I think the whole, the nub of the matter is that everybody was so excited by the whole concept, by the whole operation, that we were all enthused. We had a common purpose. I think that is possibly the answer. you know, from day one, from statements of the Arrest and Morality Act, that already was something virtually foreign to South Africans. When was the island? Ireland was
The
shortly
island wasn't very long after that, actually.
Yeah. And Ireland
Actually,
particularly.
Sisri came first.
Yes, you're quite right. Sisri and then the island. By the time we'd had those three, I think the writing was on the wall. The space had a message to offer and was going to deliver it if we could get away with it, as much as anything. And it was touch and go a good few times, whether we could. At one stage it was banned for, one of the plays was banned for a short period, wasn't it?
The island and Sisri Banzi.
Yes. Yeah. I think this is not really. Well, funny enough, one of the odd memories I have. Percy, what was the play that opens with a girl sitting naked with her back to the audience? The Prisoner?
Oh, sorry?
Was it called The Prisoner?
No, I can't remember. Actually, I've got it in the book.
There were two actors. This
Jack
girl.
Clough was in one.
Huh?
Jack Clough. The girl was tied to a chair.
Yes. Now, to go into a theatre and see a naked girl, back of a naked girl tied to a chair, was a little foreign to us Cape Townians, particularly perhaps South Africans. And that also was an odd memory that sticks in my mind as one of the things that brought home this theatre is going to be different, or is different, to anything else, to the Brian Brook type of operation we've been used to before that, English comedies and what have you. Yes, there certainly was. Perhaps a lot more for the actors and the producer. I was, by that stage, already more of an idle bystander or a member of the public. But there were, particularly when they were banning the play, and we were going to the theatre, there was a minimum chance that they start taking names and addresses down, boss or whoever it was. Wasn't a high risk for the public, but certainly was a very definite risk for the people who were involved in the space itself. I think that is that's a known. It was good, but you know, with respect, prior to the space, in fact, prior to my first marriage, I had a coloured girlfriend for 3.5 years. In Cape Town, we got away with things like that because Cape Town didn't really want apartheid. It came from Pretoria and it spread to Johannesburg, and Cape Town fought against it quietly. We get away with things. Nobody asked, when you went to buy a ticket at the cinema, nobody asked, what colour are your partners? And you turned up with somebody who's off-white, shall we say. Most people were frightened to ask questions, so it was accepted. And we did get away with a lot of things in those days. So what was to a certain extent already used to being on the edge of disaster. I have very fond memories of somebody who was also involved in the space to a certain extent, Helen Ruza, who was the wardrobe mistress of the Little Theatre. Now, Helen was an out-and-out coloured, and she was standing her dignity against anybody. She and I were very good friends, and we used to drive around and what have you, waiting to see, not so waiting to see where we're going places, to see, quite often we laughed, what would happen if the cops stopped us and picked us up. Two fairly well-known characters. She was better known than I am, but I was a director of a big company, picked up in jail for attempted miscegenation or what have you. Whilst Helen was much older than I was, we had no interest other than friendship with one another. And we used to get involved. We used to go to my flat in Bantry Bay. We used to go to the theatre. And we used to get a lot of laughs on a colour basis. bearing in mind also that we were both highly involved in the Little Theatre, where apartheid, in theory, didn't exist. We were pretty well used to it. And Helen also did help with costumes for the space for quite a while, quietly usually. The one thing that I remember as being not an eye-opener, but perhaps a slight shocker, although I think by the time I went to see it, I was really been warned in the island. I think it was John Carney and Benson, yeah, the two of them, when the one has trouble with his eye, and the other one, and they haven't got water, nothing to put in his eye, and he pees in his hand, and washes out his friend's eye with his own urine. That came as a bit of a shock, as something out of the ordinary, certainly, something to be done in public in front of an audience. I thought to myself, this is really real theatre. This is something which we have most definitely been lacking in Cape Town. Over the years, things like that are, I wouldn't say are normal, but it's not not worse things than that happen in full view of audiences or in magazines even today. The pornography is, let's face it, pretty rife. That just as a shocker of the period, remembering how many years ago would that be, Percy?
Which is that?
Hmm?
Those plays?
Yes, Ireland.
Well, it was in about 72 or 73.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So we're looking at
So it's a good 40, 50 years ago.
36 years ago, almost 40 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, we were very hidebound in our ideas then, let's face it. We'd been restricted for so long, and the few theatrical ventures that came from overseas were mainly of the English or American comedy sort of levels, most of them. The most interesting theatre in Cape Town those days was the Little Theatre. But nothing startling, nothing particularly anti-apartheid in any case. Mixed casts, to a certain extent we had them at the Little, not other places. But mixed audiences only at the Little, once again. Although probably in the Labia there were a certain amount of mixing, I should imagine. But by and large, when the space came on the scene, it was all very new, very exciting, and very thought-provoking. I think it made a lot of people to rethink their values completely. I think it did serve a very, very good purpose in the Cape.
Liz, did I understand you correctly that you had a coloured girlfriend?
Yes.
Now, this is the time, I mean, the dark days of apartheid.
Yes, absolutely.
Now,
If we've been caught, I actually, in actual fact, I was warned off her 3 times by boss. The boss, Bureau for State Security. They were the big cheese, the old version of scorpions, but with a bad reputation. And if they hadn't been nice in just warning me, they could have had me locked up, both of us locked up, and the key thrown away those days. How we got away with it, I don't know. We just said to hell with it and continued.
What is life like for her? I mean, you know.
Well, she was mixing with, she was a very educated girl. She was mixing with 90% whites, I would say, in our particular clique. Probably her biggest problem then would have been with the older generation. I can give you one particular memory that was to me interesting. I suddenly ended up with an operation very similar to one I'm going through on Thursday, And I was at the monastery lying on my stomach for 2.5, 3 weeks. At one stage, she and a couple of my other younger friends came into my private room I had there by the stoep, and we were chatting. And my mother and a couple of her friends turned up in the room also, and I didn't particularly introduce them. My mother had never met my girlfriend. I never met her until her dying day. My mother was old school, difficult to put your finger on it, but I would say very liberal, but and probably anti-apartheid in theory, but very much old school, and things were proper, and she probably have had a fit if she'd known I had a coloured girlfriend. So she never got introduced. I never actually met her, saw her once. My sister knew. My sister knew virtually everything I do, and she was also a great aficionado of the space. Went to every production going. But the older generation of those days was perhaps more inured to apartheid than we were, and accepted it easier and couldn't break loose from it that easily either. But in Cape Town, we did a lot of what we felt like. Do you remember, Percy, the Zambezi restaurant in Upper Darling Street in District 6? It was owned by A.B. Huzuk, who I didn't know he was a political character at that stage. He was obviously Muslim. His two best friends was Father John Peacock from the Anglican Church around the corner, the stone church that's still the only church that's still standing, and yours truly. And when A.B. got married, he had two best men, the two of us. So a nice Anglican minister and a not so sure about nice Jewish boy took this Muslim to the mosque for him to get married and come back and greet his wife. That's the sort of thing that we could do with a fair amount of impunity in Cape Town in those days. Although, if somebody had shouted to the cops about it, would have been in bad trouble. In fact, John and I both used to run the till at the nightclub there on occasion as being probably two of the only honest people in the place. And A.B. trusted us to look after the till for him. But Cape Town was definitely, as far as I'm concerned, the most liberal town in South Africa in those days. We complied with the letter of the law only when we had to. We did get away with a lot of things which would certainly were against the law. Does that answer that part of the question?
Yeah, I think that's told us a lot.
Very difficult to answer that question. There was so much going on the whole time that that we were all averse to. The whole operation of separate seats and seating, separate toilets and separate everything. We all knew it was wrong. We thought we weren't in a position to do anything about it. So most of us didn't do anything about it. The space wasn't frightened. The management and the actors weren't frightened, and they literally stood up and said this is wrong. Full marks to them. But the average person, I think, none of us liked it. I think that it was marvelous from that point of view that although we had been operating for better or for worse individually, this was an opportunity for us to come together and demonstrate more actively and more publicly our views on apartheid. And I think that served its purpose. There were problems with the critics, for starters. Some of them went along with us, some didn't. Some particularly more of the Afrikaner critics, gave bad reports and certainly didn't like the political implications of a lot of it. I must admit that and you may not like this, but when the People's Space virtually took over the space, and it became a question of taking the theatre to the locations, we were called at that stage, I felt that theatre was suffering. It may have been very good for the public who watched it in the locations, but it became very political. It was more political than theatrical. And my feeling was that I'd actually gone into the space because I liked its attitude to theatre, and because of the freedom of expression and the voice against apartheid. But when it became simply a political vehicle, I thought, let them do that. This is actually when I pretty well got out of the space operation. I felt let the younger people do what they want on a political level. It wasn't a reaction to apartheid. It was a pro-political operation, I would think. I think it had a lot of effect on South Africa. Some of the shows went up to Joburg as well, didn't they? And obviously, in latter years, Sweden, which was the one, the island went to Sweden, I think, for starters. And I think it opened the eyes of the world to a certain extent, certainly, I can't say how great an extent, on what had been done in South Africa by the space and its fight against apartheid. And from that point of view, I think it did a marvelous job.